thank you for joining me. I'm Hawkeye today on Maple Leafs Man Advantage, and we got a good one today. I'm going to talk about the 1973 NHL Playoffs and see how that goes. As you know, I'm a Leaf fan. If you've watched any of my other videos, if you're not, should be rather obvious I am. But in this playoff, the Leafs are not there. They ended up in, that's right, sixth place overall. They only had 64 points. They were well out of the playoffs. My own team, I would have Bernie Perrant still there, but I'm not going to overtake the Sabres. I'll allow them to make the playoffs for the first time ever. I just wanted to show that off. I don't know why, just because I love doing this. Like, I don't even know if you can see that, but that's just me figuring out, okay, who's on my team, who's going where, who do I want, who do I not want, all that stuff, all the trades I make, everything like that. I love doing that, but yawn if you don't care. But we're going to talk about the 1973 playoffs here. And yeah, let's start off looking into the quarterfinals where we've got the Buffalo Sabres who make the playoffs for the very first time. They get their first ticket to the dance, and they're going to face off against the number one team in the league. That's kind of partly the reason why I'm like, okay, Buffalo, you guys go play that team. They're going to play the Montreal Canadiens, who had 120 points in this season. Huge, big ask for the Sabres here. They're young and they're talented. We're going to see what happens here. But first, I'm going to take a deeper look at the Buffalo Sabres here. They're coached by Joe Crozier, who would later come to Toronto to the Leafs in the 1980-81 season, and he would be a coach for the Leafs. After Buffalo, he went over to the WHA and coached there, I think, for the Vancouver Blazers and the Chicago Cougars for a few seasons in that league. But he's coaching in Buffalo. It's Rene Robert that leads the team. He's got 40 goals. Rick Martin, he's got 37. Jerry Meehan, he's got 31. So they got some goal scorers here. But Buffalo still had a couple of 20 goal scorers as well. There's Gilbert Perreault. He had 28 goals. He led the team with 60 assists as well. And so therefore he had 88 points. He led the team in that category as well. And Jim Lorentz, he scored 27 goals. So they got five of them on this squad. That's pretty good. They also got a couple of rough, tough defensemen here, Jim Schoenfeld and Tracy Pratt, who interestingly, he'd be on my team. Um, and then, yeah, so they had some muscle to line up. Schoenfeld was a good rookie as well. This was his first season. He finished fourth in the Calder voting as well this year as a rookie, so that's great for Buffalo. In net, they have Roger Crozier. I don't think there's any relation between Roger and Joe, but he won 23 games, had a save percentage of 905. And Dave Dryden, the other option, he had 14 games that he won and had a 908 save percentage. Both of them had three shutouts as well. Um, so yeah, even though those are good numbers for a goaltender, in order for them to beat Montreal, usually this is what kind of has to happen. You got to turn to your goaltending or your defense to beat off these higher seeded teams at times. Can both of these guys or one of these guys step up and get like a save percentage in the nine teens, something like that? Play even better. Um, we're gonna see. We're gonna see what happens here. So, taking a deeper look at Montreal here, we got Scotty Bowman behind the bench now. They were loaded with talent in Montreal. Jacques Lemaire led the way with 44 goals and 95 points. Yvon Cournoyer, he had 40 goals. Frank Mahovlich had 38 goals. He led the team with 55 assists. Youngster Guy Lafleur, he had 28 goals. Mark Tardif had 25 goals. And both Pete Mahovlich and Chuck Lafleur, they had 21 goals apiece as well. Excellent. Guy Lapointe on defense, he was great in Montreal. He finished second in Norris voting too. Who else but Bobby Orr? he could add some toughness to the team as well from the back end. He even had 19 goals, which is excellent as a defenseman. And then in net, there's no question who the guy's going to be. Just let the runway clear for Kenny Dryden. Put him in the net. He won the Vezina, led the league in 33 wins, 926 save percentage, 226 goals against average, and six shutouts. Led in all those stats. Um, he was tied with someone with the shutouts, but anyways, he still led the way in all of those stats. So we got Montreal and Boston for the very first time in the playoffs. I remember these guys playing a few times back in the old Adams division, Montreal and Buffalo. So here we go. Game one is going to be at the Montreal Forum, and Buffalo must have played well, but it was Cornway who scored the power play game winner early in the third period. He also had an assist, and Montreal won 2-1. Very tight score, though, there. One thing I find very cool, this is awesome. I'm not sure, I didn't look it up if this ever happened before or after, but you had brothers in the net. So you had Dave Dryden for Buffalo and Ken Dryden for Montreal. They both must have played great. Dave had 34 saves, Ken had 31. So there you go. And they're going to turn to both of these guys again in game two at the Montreal Forum again. Um, and Buffalo appeared to be playing well once again, well against this Montreal squad. They actually they led by a 2-0 score after the first period. Yet, Cornway led the way. He scored a hat trick and had an assist. And Montreal took game two by a 7-3 score. So they were getting a lot more pucks in the net. So Montreal was doing what was likely expected of them in taking the first two games at home, but it wasn't exactly smooth sailing for them. Well, they weren't easy wins. Game three would be at the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium. And the Sabres really needed to just keep playing well against this game. Keep playing your game, see what you can do. Try it as they might. Kenny Dryden made 42 saves in game three, and it was rookie Murray Wilson who scored the game winner about halfway through the game. And Montreal took game three by a 5-2 score. So looking at Buffalo, they must have been ecstatic when they made the playoffs, very first time ever. Um, but they had to play the number one team in the league, the Montreal Canadiens, and they were down 3-0 at this point. They're still at home though, so that's a good thing. They need to bring their A game for game four. Um, and they were led by Perot for game four, who scored two goals, including the power play game winner. He also had an assist. And Roger Crozier had 23 saves, and Buffalo had 50 shots. They weren't willing to just lay down and die here. They were really taking it to the Montreal Canadiens. Buffalo won 5-1, bringing the series back to Montreal in the Forum. Now, game five must have been a very good game as it ended up going into overtime. And it was Rene Robert who scored two goals, including the game winner, and he had an assist. Buffalo won it 3-2. So that's good. Must have also had some good goaltending, as Dryden had 31 saves. Crozier had 38 saves for the win. So there you go. So Buffalo had battled quite a bit back in the series. They were down 3-0. It's now 3-2. They're going back home. Um, but for this game, the problem for the Sabres is Montreal may have been more than ready for this one. Montreal was up 4-0 after the first period, and Lafleur, he ended up with the game winner. Looks like the Buffalo just didn't give up, though, as Ken Dryden still had to make 42 saves for the win. And Montreal took the game and the series by a 4-2 score. So I think Montreal, or Buffalo rather, did a good job in this first round against the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal was up 32 points at the season's end, and the Habs also had 72 more goals than Buffalo. And it was a tight series. And there you go, Montreal 1-6, but it was a tight series for Buffalo. They played well, I think. Now looking at Montreal for Montreal, it was Cornway. He had 5 goals and 8 points in the 6 games. Serge Savard had five assists and 7 points. It was Jim Roberts and Captain Henri Richard. They led the team with 12 penalty minutes. Kind of surprising as both of those guys were not big penalty minutes guys, but hey, this is playoff hockey. Anything can happen, right? So there you have it. Dryden was excellent in the half net. He was the only goalie Montreal played. So he grabbed all 4 wins, had a sparkling 930 save percentage in the series, so that's good. Now, looking in comparison to Buffalo and their goalies, I don't want to hang it on these guys, but Crozier had a 904 save percentage, and Dave Dryden had an 873 save percentage. So Kenny was a huge difference in this series for the Habs, as well as Cornway getting all those points. And the Habs had 4 power play goals from Cornway, Lapointe, Lafleur, and Mahavlich. Each of them had one. So they had 4 power play goals in the 6 games. Now, back then, if you can remember, the playoffs were only 3 rounds. So we're into the semifinals here, and they would be playing the Broad Street Bullies or the Philadelphia Flyers. So looking deeper at the Flyers here, they had some goal scoring, I'm sorry, as they had Rick McLeish, who had 50 goals for them. He also had 100 points. Cowboy Bill Flett, he had 43. And it was Bobby Clark who won the Hart and the Lester B. Pearson and had 37 goals. He led the squad with 67 assists and 104 points. So a real good season here from Bobby Clark. But that's not it. He also had Gary Dornhofer and Bill Barber. They both had 30 goals. And Ross Lonsberry had 21 goals. And just to name a few, more than a few, they had some tough guys as well in Philadelphia. They had Dave the Hammer Schultz, Bob Kelly, Don Selesky, Dornhofer, Andre Dupont, and Barry Ashby. These guys could mix it up for the Flyers if needed, and they were usually the starters of it as well. So the big question is, could the Habs match up against all of these thugs in the Philadelphia Flyer lineup? The Flyers also had Doug Favell in net. He won 20 games, had a 916 save percentage and 3 shutouts in the regular season, so that's pretty good. And he'd be the guy in the Flyer net for this series. So here we go. Now, the Flyers, they beat the Minnesota North Stars in the opening round in 6 games. Looking at that series, it looks like game 5 was the huge one, as it was the Flyers. They won it at home, but it took into overtime to win that, and then they would go on to win game 6 on the road as well. For that series, it was Lonsbury. He led the team with 3 goals. Bill Flett had 4 assists and 5 points. The Pin King, do I really need to ask? It was Dave the Hammer Schultz. He had 39 penalty minutes in just 6 games. That's a lot. He must have been a horrible thorn in the side of the North Stars in this series. No doubt if he was. Now, if you remember, the Leafs still have Bernie Perron, so he's not with the Flyers. Bernie was playing in the WHA, though, not with the Leafs. Um, so for this series, it was Doug Favell. He played all the games for the Flyers, and he must have played great. He won all 4 games. He had a shutout and a 943 save percentage. Now, they also had Michel Bellemare. He did play just over 10 minutes in one of the games. I see Minnesota won 5-0. It could have been that game. So he had an 889 save percentage, but he didn't play very much. So there you go. So the opening game in the semifinals here would be played at the Montreal Forum. Montreal's got the home ice advantage throughout the series. They were the number 1 team, but it must have been a hard-fought game. Guy Lapointe had 2 goals, including a power play goal and assist, and Simon Nollet had 2 goals for the Flyers, and it was Rick McLeish, the Flyers' big-time scorer that season, who scored the game winner early in overtime. He also had an assist. And Favell played well. He had 41 saves against the Habs, assisting and holding Habs back from winning game one. And the Flyers took it on the road by a 5-4 score. So the Flyers are leading in this series here. In game two, we're going back into overtime again. Wow. This time it was rookie Larry Robinson who scored the game winner for Montreal. Dryden had 36 saves, and Montreal took it by a 4-3 score. We're tied up at one, now going to Philly. And the Flyers should still feel great. They split their games on the road, and they very well could have took game two if they were able to just win in overtime, get that goal. But it didn't happen. Robinson got it for Montreal. So game three would be at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and yet it was another tight one. Henri Richard scored the game winner, and Dryden had 25 saves for the win. Montreal took it 2-1. Favell had 24 saves for the loss, but there you go, another tight one. So game four, Montreal though was starting to put a little space in the score here. They did get an empty netter, but it was for that game. Tardif, he scored the power play game winner, and they took it by a 4-1 score. Dryden had 31 saves, must have played great. So we're going back to the form here. And the Flyers, they had to turn the series around. They're down 3-1. In game five, Bill Flett scored with just over 5 minutes into the third period. Philly was up 3-2, but Montreal bounced back with 3 goals of their own, including the game winner from Richard, and Montreal took it 5-3 and took the series in five. Although the series was definitely not quite a blowout, like the number of games may suggest. I know there was a 4-1 in there, but I think there was an empty netter, so like these were pretty tight scores. But Montreal, they were the better team. They came out on top in 5 games. So looking just at that series, Cornway once again he led the squad with 4 goals. Mahovlich led the squad with 4 assists and 6 points. Bob Murdoch led the team. He only had 8 penalty minutes in 5 games. Um, so I think that's kind of amazing, and definitely making me think that Bowman had a game plan pounded into these Montreal guys' head. Um, maybe to try not to give into the bully tactics done by the Flyers. Just to compare the two teams, the Flyers had 5 players with more penalty minutes than Murdoch did. It was Bill Barber that led that team. He had 13. So Montreal had 5 power play goals in the 6 games, coming from Lafleur, Lapointe, Tardif, Cornway, and Lemaire, all different guys. Once again, now they've got. And I said 6 games. It was 5 games. My apologies. So that gives them 9 power play goals in 10 games, which ain't bad. Ain't bad at all. So here we go. We're going off to the Stanley Cup Finals, and who are they going to play? The Chicago Blackhawks, who I'm going to say they could have been New York Rangers early on, perhaps as well. I think in the late 70s, they were still good though, I think, but Chicago may have been the best team of the 1970s that never won a Stanley Cup. They would go on some long playoff runs like this one. I think they did a couple of years ago as well. Um, but they'd get knocked out. And then later in the 70s, I think they would get bounced out early. Even through the beginning of the 80s, they still had a good team. They just couldn't get it done in the playoffs. Um, but, anyways, they're playing Chicago. Here we go. Chicago beat the St. Louis Blues in 5 games in the first round. In the semifinals, they beat a very good team in the New York Rangers. They beat them in 5 games as well. So we got the 8-2 Chicago Blackhawks against the 8-3 Montreal Canadiens. We're going to see how this series went down. First, we're going to look deeper into Chicago here, and it was Jimmy Pappen. He led the team with 41 goals and 92 points. Dennis Hall had 39 goals. Cliff Carroll had 33. Pitt Martin had 29 goals and he led the team with 61 assists. Finally, still playing great. We got Stan Mikita still in Chicago. He had 27 goals for Chicago. And the Hawks had at the very least, two tough defensemen in Phil Russell and Keith Magnuson. They also had Jerry Korob there. Um, so there you go. They got some guys on the back end here that can play it tough. And Chicago also had Hall of Famer Tony Esposito. He won 32 games, had a 917 save percentage, and four shutouts for the season. So game one is going to be at the Forum. And look at this. For Chicago, Pitt Martin scored two goals, but Montreal ended up scoring four goals in the third period. Chuck Lafleur ended up scoring two goals for the Habs, and Jacques Lemaire had two goals, both being on the power play, and one being the game winner. He also had two assists. Habs took it by a big 8-3 score. Chicago really needed to tighten their defense up here, as that was way too many goals to allow in one period. Game two was tighter in the end, but Cornway scored two goals, one on the power play, the other one a game winner, and Montreal took it 4-1. So we're going to Chicago Stadium now. Chicago's down 2-0 in the series. They need to improve their game here. Can they solve the Habs? Can they do it? Well, Chicago did it. They were actually 5-0 early in the second period. Dennis Hall scored two goals, one on the power play, the other one into an empty net. The score got much tighter. Chicago took it 7-4. There were two empty netters, so it was like a 5-4 game. Um, but Montreal almost came back in this one. So wow, that was close. Um, and so there you have it. They took it 7-4. So it's 2-1 in the series now for Montreal. In game four, though, Montreal tightened right up defensively, and Mark Tardif had the game winner and an assist. Montreal took it 4-0, and they just needed one more win to win the Stanley Cup, and they're going back to the Forum. Wouldn't it be perfect to win that on home ice? A lot of the time it doesn't happen. Um, but we had a shootout in game five. There was a lot of goals to be had from the Montreal Forum ice. Claude LaRose had two goals and an assist for the Habs, but Jim Pappen had two goals. Stan Mikita had two goals and two assists. Chicago took it by an 8-7 score. That's a lot of goals, especially seeing you got Dryden and Esposito in that. Um, so Chicago took another win. They're still in the series. It's 3-2 Montreal. We're going back to Chicago, and we're going to have some goals over in Chicago as well. Not quite as many, but Pitt Martin for Chicago, he scored a hat trick. Two of the goals were on the power play for Chicago, but it was Cornway who scored the game winner with just over 8 minutes into the third. He also had two assists. Montreal took it by a 6-4 score, and they are the 1973 Stanley Cup champions. They did it again. So looking at Montreal here, it was Yvon Cornway who was a Conn Smythe. He was a playoff MVP. And looking at his numbers, I said his name a few times. I think he deserved it. He led the NHL and his team. He had 15 goals in just 17 games. That is amazing. He also led the team and the NHL with 25 points. That is also amazing in just 17 games. He also led the NHL with his three game winners. Um, Frank Mahovlich also played great for Montreal. He had nine goals, led the team with 14 assists, and he had 23 points in 17 games. Serge Savard, he played great. He had 24 power minutes, but he also had some points for Montreal as well. Lemaire and Cornway, they both had three power play goals to lead the team. Pete Mahovlich had a shorthanded goal, which was tied with like five or six, seven other guys. There was one that was the lead for the playoffs that season. But in that, Ken Dryden, he was the lone goalie Montreal played. So he had all 12 wins, had a 907 save percentage and a shutout. Um, Montreal also had 6 power play goals in the final, so they had 15 power play goals in 17 games. Not bad. That's almost a free goal a game. In return, they gave up 12 power play goals in 17 games. So I didn't look at the percentages, but I'm imagining the power play percentage was better than the goals against them. That percentage, for sure. So there you go. Montreal is the 1973 Stanley Cup champions again. They keep doing it. And here we go. So if you like this video, hit the thumbs up, subscribe. I got many more videos on here on hockey, generally about the Leafs, but hey, this one didn't really have much to do with them at all, but just going through time since 1967 and seeing why the Leafs haven't won a cup since then. There's more than one reason. And then if you want to comment on anything, go ahead and do so. But until next time, maybe next year's our year. Go Leafs, go.